being here. Our conversation with Dr. Gilbert. I'm going to do a little introduction, which you might have seen in the program, and then I have 5 questions to ask her. If you want to ask follow-ups in the chat while we're talking, please do so. Otherwise, with whatever time we have remaining, we'll open it up to more of a general conversation. So to start off, Dr. Jen Gilbert is currently head of marketing for private banking at Brown Brothers Harriman. She received her Ph.D. in history from Duke in 1998. While finishing her doctorate, she worked part-time for a bank and volunteered to create an exhibit about the history of one of its branches. By bringing her skills as a historian into the non-academic world, she started a career that has since grown to include strategic project management and information technology. So, to start off, could you tell us a little bit about your background, Jen, and sort of like what brought you, I guess, to Duke and then to your current position?
Sure. You know, I came to Duke from Syracuse University, where I had also been a history undergrad, and I wanted to teach. You know, that was really for me my sort of career goal and aspiration, and I wanted to have as much flexibility in that as possible. So I decided to get a PhD, thinking that I could teach at the college level, at a high school if I wanted to. And so and honestly, I really loved the study of history. And so frankly, I kind of felt like I was pulling one over on everyone. Like I was going to spend, you know, a few years doing this thing that I loved, and people saw it as like an okay use of my time. So, so I came to Duke really thinking that I was going to be a teacher. And that's what really kind of brought me, you know, to the university. And then when I moved to Boston to write my dissertation, as you pointed out, I got a job working at a bank, you know, thinking it was beginning to be a temporary assignment, and happened to find out that someone I was working for wanted to hire a historian to do a history of this bank branch that had been recently rehabbed. And I just raised my hand and said, you know, I can do that. And frankly, I saw it as something that was going to be a resume builder for me. You know, it was sort of this opportunity to put another line item on my CV. And it turned into a job, which I accepted, thinking this will be part-time. And that's kind of how my career started. And I went sort of through, you know, working in first a bank, then in asset management for a big company here in Boston called State Street Global Advisors, then to New York for another asset manager there, and now finally back in banking, but private banking at Brown Brothers Harriman. And so, you know, I would say what sort of ties all of those things together is kind of the relentless pursuit of wherever I saw an opportunity. So I'm a pretty, you know, I was not somebody who said, I'm going to start, like, this is my career and I've got an end goal. It was really a job that I enjoyed, and then another opportunity appeared and I pursued it. And that's kind of how I ended up here. It doesn't sound very planful, and it really wasn't. But what I've discovered is the things that I really liked about teaching, being able to communicate an idea, being able to help people come from like sort of one place of understanding to another, really kind of helping to, you know, help people write and communicate clearly. All of those skills, which I really enjoyed in the classroom, are applicable in large organizations. So a lot of what, you know, you're kind of learning as a PhD student really has applicability into big companies. You just don't necessarily think that it does. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. I'm glad that I was going to ask about the teaching aspect, because if that's what sort of brought you into this at the beginning, I was wondering, you know, what the through line is. So I'm glad that you touched on the applicability, because I think most of us were at Melissa's workshop earlier this morning, where she was talking specifically about the skills that you develop throughout the PhD process that can be applied elsewhere. And I think that's a very dynamic definition of teaching that you've just discussed.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. You know, I think often as PhD students, we sort of think of ourselves, or as PhDs, we think of ourselves as expert in the subject of our dissertation or in the topics that we have studied. And really, what is most applicable beyond academia is not the subject matter in which you are trained. It is the softer skills that you have developed in the process of becoming a PhD. The ability to take disparate ideas and connect them is a skill not everyone has. The ability to take a complex idea and write about it or communicate to a group of people who don't know as much as you do and do so in a way that's very clear is a skill that not everyone has. To be able to run a meeting, not unlike you run a classroom, where you kind of have an agenda and you have to lead people through a discussion and you have certain points that you want to make, that's a skill that not everyone has. And I would say the sort of final thing is, we are taught to see ourselves as expert, right? So whatever your subject matter is, whatever the topic of your dissertation is, you are the expert in the room to your committee, to your fellow students, and acquiring that voice to be able to say, I'm going to talk to you today about a given topic. That voice is critical, and one that you already have. And a lot of people have to build in their careers. So, I would say jettison this idea that what you're being trained on is the subject matter of your dissertation, and think instead about the skills you're gaining as an expert voice in a room.
So our next question is about a typical day at your organization. So you're in private banking right now, which to me is pretty foreign.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think if you could tell us a little bit,
Sure.
about like what your day is like, and also maybe how COVID has affected what the everyday looks like for you.
Yeah. So, private banking was foreign for me as well. And, I will kind of give you the Brown Brothers Harriman model for private banking, which is not the same for everybody. But essentially, Brown Brothers is a 200+ year organization. And we work with, we sort of talk about, we work with families at the intersection of their businesses and their wealth. And so essentially, we work with families who own substantive businesses. These might be businesses that have been handed down through a couple generations. It might be something that this person has started and hopes to hand down. But throughout that process of building this business, and I'm not talking about like a corner drugstore, or corner dry cleaner. I'm talking about something that's much more substantial than that. There's a whole host of other sorts of issues that arise. One, there's wealth planning needs for those families and their members. There's also corporate advisory and sort of business services that we provide to those business owners. And we talk a lot about sort of the intersection of those things. So from a marketing standpoint, you think like, how do you market to that? We are actually always looking for what are the issues that are most salient and important to this sort of group of people. And they vary, they range far and wide. It could be those sort of strict business issues, capital allocation in your private business. It could also be preparing your next generation to take over your business. It could be, how do you raise children with wealth and do so in a way that they continue to be productive members of society and not sort of ne'er-do-wells. It could also be estate and trust planning. What are the latest tax changes and how do they impact you? So our sort of topics that we address with our clients really range from incredibly intimate conversations about families and the family dynamics and family dynamics in business to trust advice and tax planning advice, which you can tell by my sort of disparaging, that's like the least important thing that I think we do. And frankly, I took the job because the goal for me as a marketer is to create engaging, interesting content on this sort of wide variety of topics. And so for me, being well-read, being kind of cognizant of the cultural moment in which we find ourselves, all of that means that I spend my days trying to figure out how to engage our clients and prospects in interesting conversations with the people that make up Brown Brothers Harriman that will lead to business in the future. And all we're trying to do is say, we are here, we are smart people, we have all kinds of ways we can help you, and we'd like to do that. And ultimately, people become our clients as a result. COVID changed the role dramatically because there was all this anxiety and all. Now you would think if you have a lot of money, what are you anxious about, right? Like I kind of like joke a little bit about that. Like if you have $100 million, like simmer down, like your issues are not the same as the issues for everybody else. But anxiety is real. Anxiety is real for human beings. And in a time of great change, we had to pivot from in-person events and a lot of these are in-person conversations we were having to Zoom. And we started doing webinars on every, topic possible, sort of known to man. And the business actually grew during COVID, which is sort of remarkable. So the job changes every day, but I'm sort of paid to be kind of an idea machine and really think about like what kinds of content and marketing are really relevant to this audience and that they will find interesting. And not all of my ideas get adopted. I have some great ideas that, get completely panned by my organization. And so part of the job is also making sure that, you don't fall in love with all your ideas, but you're willing to be flexible too. So COVID changed the role and just made it busier, frankly, because there was this real desire to hear from us on this wide ranging, number of topics, and to really stay in front of people. So I'll stop there.
It sounds like you've also been spending a lot of time on Zoom,
Yeah.
like the rest of us, for sure.
I'm ready to go back to the office, actually. I'll say that. I thought I really loved working from home, but I got to get out of this house. So I'm ready to go back whenever they're willing to have me.
Yeah. So for anyone who maybe has listened to this description of what sounds like a very complex and challenging and exciting kind of job, very multifaceted, what would you recommend that postdocs and students who are interested in exploring this field or the kind of job you do specifically, like how can they prepare for that? And you've already touched on this, but maybe if you want to be more specific about your role, what kind of skills and experiences might be most valuable for someone who's also thinking about resume building and that kind of thing?
I would say the first thing is to think about networking. It sounds like kind of an old, kind of trope, like, is that something that's really going to make a difference? But it's all about networking and it's all about your network and getting as many people to sort of know you and what you do as possible. So, for me, I have always been somebody in my career who, when contacted, hey, I'm looking for a job, or do you know anyone who can help me with this? I'm always trying to connect people and sort of create this sort of network effect, because when I've needed a job, that is what has helped me. So I would say the first thing is cast a very wide net. There are a lot of organizations out there, some of them nonprofit, some of them for profit, that do really interesting work. And, for example, let's take like the pharmaceutical or like biopharma kinds of companies, of which there are many here in Boston. Those companies are, if you're not going to be a scientist for them, and clearly as a humanities PhD, I was not trained to do that, but they have tremendous communication requirements. They have regulatory requirements. They have, compliance requirements. So there are a lot of different ways to find entry points into these organizations outside of just sort of the marketing organization, right? So communications is a big part of that. I would say the other one that you don't really sort of think about as a PhD student is project management. You think project management, big companies, that's a skill and a discipline. And it is one that actually can provide you an entry point to sort of learning about an organization and understanding what they do. And if you're a PhD student or somebody who's gotten their degree, you're a project manager at heart, because you have project managed yourself into a degree, right? You have said, here are the things I need to do. I need to do them by these dates. I've written this dissertation. Here's how I structured it for myself. So you already have project management skills. And I joke that that's really make a lot of lists, know your deadlines, and meet them. That's project management in a nutshell. So try to find, all of these organizations have these kinds of roles that are about the business process of the organization, not necessarily being a banker or being a scientist or being a, a thing that you are really required to train deeply to do well. I'm talking about the kinds of people that are the connective tissue in an organization, the ones that are part of the strategy group and then try to, make a change. So a lot of my success in my career was on that sort of project management front and got to do a lot of different things. And if you can emphasize these skills that you have, the communication skills, the writing skills, the manage a room and a meeting, keep people on task for what they need to do, the what of what you're doing almost doesn't matter because you can learn it, right? I once managed a project from Boston to consolidate trading desks all over Asia to Hong Kong. And what do I know about trading? Nothing. I'm not a trader. What do I know about trading desks? Nothing. Never been a part of them. But somebody explained to me what we needed to happen. I set up a lot of meetings with people, asked a lot of questions, and was able to get that done. And it sounds intimidating, but remember, you are trained to go deeply into any given subject matter that may be in front of you. And so you've got it. You can do it. It's just ask a lot of questions and learn it. So, I would say try to think about, if you want to go into the private sector, where are the roles that are these sort of like business process, sort of connective tissue within an organization? And that's a really good entry point. And then when you find a role like that or one that really interests you, just figure out who in your LinkedIn network or who do you know at that organization. And don't be afraid to reach out to them and say, can you introduce me to the recruiter? And how do I, who's the hiring manager for this role? Do you know them? Somebody told me once that, we tend to reach out only to our closest friends and the people we've known the longest, but it's actually your weak ties in your LinkedIn network that's actually probably going to give you the biggest help. So it's that person that you met at a conference a year ago, and you write to them and you say, hi, we met a year ago. You might not remember me. Here's what I'm trying to do. That person will probably drop what they're doing to help you. So don't be afraid to lean on weak ties in your network as well as the strong ones, and just try to build that network out as much as you can.
I think that's super insightful, especially what you were saying about thinking about positions that are kind of the connective tissue for these organizations. I think that's a really useful way to frame it, especially, thinking about it myself, like the idea of going into the private sector and getting involved with these giant corporations, that can be super daunting if, like you said, you're not a trader, you're not doing pharma or whatever. But that's a good way to think about it, and to think about the kind of position that as a PhD you can slot yourself into.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, one of my very, very early jobs at State Street was running the IT help desk. And I had a moment, I will full, candor, where I went home and I was like, great, I got a degree from Duke and I am the help desk manager. Like, kill me now. It was really like, I thought, well, my career's over, because this is, where do you go from here? And over a couple years, I essentially, the help desk used to send out these notes to the business users of Global Advisors, like, so-and-so database is down. And all of the business users would be like, I don't even know what that is. What are you even talking about? Why does this matter to me? And so I switched all of the communications to say, we are having an issue. Here are the business applications you use every day that might be affected. Here's our time, to recovery, and try to position everything, not from the standpoint of IT that was sending out the message, but from the standpoint of the business user that was receiving it. Again, trying to act as kind of that connective tissue, right? I'm the bridge. I'm not really an IT person. I'm not really a business person, but I can at least position myself as a business person and think, what would I want to know? And it was, people were like, this is great. I finally understand what's going on. And 2 years later, a senior executive who ran all of the websites and internal communications for the firm called me up and said, I have an opening on my team. You've done this great work in IT. Would you like to come work on the web team? And I just said, sure, because it was an opportunity to get out of what I was doing, which I sort of saw as a dead end. But it was because I worked on just changing the communication of what we were doing. So, you will find when people see you as someone who can make change happen in an organization or move work forward, they will come find you when they have an opportunity that they think you're good for.
Mm. Okay. And our final question is about the employment outlook in your field. So private banking, I guess the type of marketing that you do as well. What's the outlook for people that are interested? And especially, I guess, in the context of COVID, you've mentioned that things have kind of grown and gotten busier. So
yeah, marketing is kind of an interesting discipline. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, it was far less technical than it is now. Today, people do a lot of digital marketing, and you do need some skills around that, or at least you need to be conversant in the vernacular that is digital marketing. But every firm has communications positions, and I sort of separate that from marketing in that big companies need to talk to their employees all the time. They need to communicate all kinds of things to them. And a lot of communications work is around creating a culture for that organization, or at least sustaining it. Those jobs are not going away. They are, every marketing team I know is hiring people. Every communications team that I'm aware of is hiring people. And project management is another one, right? Every business that might be considering retooling itself or reimagining itself needs people who can help take it from point A to point B. So I would say, and at least financial services, continues to be a robust, large employer, across the country. So within banking, asset management, retirement, and sort of savings planning, all insurance, all of those companies are hiring and are still growing. So I would say the outlook is pretty good. The biggest barrier, I think, for a lot of people, as it was for me initially, is feeling like it is okay to take your degree from Duke in whatever it is, history in our case, and go do something else. Is that a waste? Did I just waste my time? How do I feel about that? And I'm not going to lie, a couple of years of, did I waste my time? Was this the right thing to do? And you just kind of get over it, frankly. But that's, I think, the sticking point for a lot of people is you invest so much in getting your PhD. It is not easy. It's long, it's hard, it's painful. And to pivot from that can feel so difficult that sometimes people don't do it because they can't overcome their own initial sort of sense of hesitancy about it. But I encourage people to do it, because frankly, here's the other thing I will say, at least for financial services, MBAs, they're a dime a dozen. Everyone's an MBA in a financial services company. You know what they're not? PhDs in history. So you will find senior leaders who hear that about you, and they want to know more, and they want to know what you study, and they want to know why that's interesting, and they want to have conversations about it. So your PhD, particularly from a school like Duke, which is so excellent, will make you stand out in a crowd because not everyone has one. And so you've got to use that to your advantage as much as possible.
okay, we have a couple minutes left, and I know there are other breakout rooms that start at 12:30. So is there a question or two maybe for Jen before we run off to our separate spaces?
I'll say this, obviously connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm a big networker, so I'm happy to have everyone, send me an invite. And I'll answer your questions some other time. You don't have to ask them in a public forum. You can wait a year and ask me then. I guess what I'd like to leave everyone with is a sense that there's a big world out there. And it's filled with really interesting people doing interesting things. And as a Duke trained PhD, your skills are in demand. You just have to get over the fact that no one's hiring you for your PhD subject, your specific expertise. If you can move past that, there's a big world out there, and I think you can exploit the hell out of it.
Mm. I think that's a great empowering parting message. Thank you so much, Dr. Gilbert, for your insight.
Absolutely.
I
Thank you,
think
Nikki.
that was very digestible too. I definitely have a bunch of tips and tricks. So
Well, I'm a marketer at heart. So, I know shorter is better, and you got to leave them with a few key takeaways. Oh, Amanda, I think your hand is up. I'm sorry.
Can I squeeze in one more question?
Please.
Jen, how do we take a 12-page CV, for instance, and articulate it into a resume that someone who does not have a PhD would recognize in industry?
You do it in your cover letter, and you do it in your summary. So right at the top of your CV, you should have a summary that speaks to your skills, and really what you bring to the table, and then let the rest of it be highlights. I would put at the bottom, a longer CV is available should somebody be interested, and utilize your LinkedIn profile to highlight some things that are not on your resume. Those things should complement each other. They don't have to be mirror images of each other. So your LinkedIn profile could be quite in-depth and quite detailed, even if your CV is much shorter, or your resume is much shorter. And then I would just use, though, a summary at the top to talk about the skills and who you are, because particularly business people, they have very short attention spans. So got to feed it to them in little bits.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, Jen.
You're
We've had
welcome.
a lot of Zoom mishaps, so I apologize for being distracted. I'm trying to put out these, but really grateful for all the insight that you gave to everyone. And we have recorded this, and so I think that it's going to be really useful for some other folks after this.
Great. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Sure. Bye-bye.